Chapter 48, Controlling the Black Pope's Holy Roman 14th Amendment, American Empire from Masons Lyndon B. Johnson to George W. Bush. Arming CIA, Fun and Games, Project Monarch. Arming our Sino-Soviet Muslim invaders for Rome's World War III. Wherefore do the wicked live, become old, yea, are mighty in power. They spend their days in wealth. Therefore they say unto God, Depart from us, for we desire not the knowledge of thy ways. Who shall declare his way to his face? And who shall repay him for what he hath done? Job 21:7, 13, 14, and 31. And a devil, taking him up into a high mountain, shewed unto him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. And the devil said unto him, All this power will I give thee, and the glory of them, for that is delivered unto me, and to whomsoever I will give it. If thou therefore wilt worship me, all shall be thine. If Satan has truly given the Pope his de facto political power to rule every nation from Rome, which power the Pope accepts at his coronation, the vicar of Christ must then be a willing and conscious devil worshipper. Luke chapter 4 verses 5 to 7. Now, said the Jesuit, listen to me a few moments and I will tell you what I know. Your president is elected by the conclave of cardinals at Rome. The same will elect the Pope. Your people nominate the candidates. Our confidential agents select from the number the one whom they believe to be the most favorable to the interests of the church. He, of course, is always elected. The Jesuit to the American. J. Wayne Lawrence, 1855. And while they amuse the public with games, the majority of American professional sports franchises being owned by papal knights, they spent their own time planning the murder of their defenseless subjects, whose only crime was that they loved God better than the Pope, and that they worship Christ and look to him alone for salvation instead of to the Church and the Virgin. M.F. Cusack, 1896. How long shall the Roman Catholic hierarchy play the people for fools? Shall the government be of the people, for the people, and by the people, or by the Pope? Let's not let the Pope of Rome name our president for us. Lovers of your country, beware of Jesuitical intrigues, the political power of Romanism, and the honeyed words of politicians reaching after the presidency. Jeremiah J. Crowley, 1912, Irish-American ex-priest. The power of the Society of Jesus in the Catholic Church is beyond doubt enormous. It is said, apparently with truth, that the Jesuit general, the Black Pope as he is called, can make and unmake bishops and even cardinals. He has various agents and representatives within the walls of the Vatican, and he can gain the ear of the Pope whenever he wishes. Again and again, the Society has been able to oppose successfully the plans and wishes of the popes. The Society, which is perennial at Rome, is able to block the efforts of passing popes like Pope John Paul I, who sought to prematurely establish diplomatic relations with Israel prior to the end of the company's Cold War. The order is to the church what the church is to the world. The order is a kind of parasite sucking the vital power of the church. It holds the confidence and consciences of so many bishops, cardinals, and prelates. In fine, it works in so many ways on the functionaries of the church that it has become, as it were, an inner circle in the church. It has made the Pope more and more like its own autocratic general, and has reduced the bishops more and more to the status of provincials, and the Society who are officials nominated by and controlled by the general without any inherent authority. An interesting proof of Jesuit prestige and power in this country is the existence in the shadow of the Capitol at Washington of the Jesuit School for Foreign Service, which trained the past CFR/CIA Director Knight of Malta George J. Tenet Heaven, overseen the demolition of the World Trade Center in obedience to his master, Edward Cardinal Egan. Opened a few years ago through the instrumentality of an Irish-American, Fr. Edmund Walsh, S.J., at his School of Diplomatic Service, to be the largest of its kind in America. Young Americans to be later recruited into the order's CFR are trained to guide the future fortunes of the Republic. There's no small irony in the situation. Jesuits, by rule, are detached from love of country. Each and every Jesuit is under oath to obey the behests of his general at Rome, who at present happens to be a Pole, Vladimir Lenikowski, who most probably will never be an American. It is quite within the power of the general to dictate the principles and theories to be taught by the Jesuits of Washington. One cannot forget the words of Pope Clement XIV, who accused them of rising up against the very kings who admitted them into their countries. E. Boyd Barrett, they are a public plague, and the plague of the world. From the Jesuit colleges there never is sent a pupil obedient to his father, devoted to his country, loyal to his prince. Every species of vice finds its patronage in them. There is no perjury, no sacrilege, no parricide, no incense, no fraud, no treason which cannot be masked as meritorious beneath the mantle of their dispensation. Paulo Sarpin, 1620. Washington glass cases along a wall on the top floor. Jesuit Georgetown University's library contained a surprisingly timely and provocative exhibit, Georgetown in the 60s, from Pat Buchanan to the SDS. Photos and clips show Presidents Lyndon Baines Johnson, Bill Clinton, and two-time presidential candidate and Irish Roman Catholic, Jesuit-trained Knight of Malta, noted author, or right from the beginning a republic, not an empire, and the death of the West, also a founding member of the NBC's Jesuit-controlled McLaughlin Group and CNN's The Capitol Gang and Crossfire, Pat Buchanan. Apart from the university, president of that period, the late Jesuit Fr. Edward Bunn. Only one priest is mentioned twice in the exhibit, Jesuit Fr. Richard McSorley, accomplice in the Otis JFK assassination, and confessor Jackie Kennedy, now 80, and the head of the One-Man Center for Peace Studies at Georgetown, Freemason and CFR member Johnson, is mentioned for saying the only reason he left Georgetown Law School was because Lady Bird was in Texas. High-level Freemason and CFR member Bill Clinton, one of his Georgetown classmates, later becoming the world-famous Roman Catholic actor and activist Tommy Lee Jones, who played Clay L. Shaw in Oliver Stone's JFK director's cut, and played the part of a top-secret intelligence officer, a modern super-secret Jesuit above the law, using high-tech weapons against aliens whose existence is notoriously espoused by Jesuits of the Vatican Observatory. In Men in Black was one of the students that helped clean up after the Washington civil rights riots of 1968, but the exhibit deals more with his class presidencies. In 1969, McSorley took a sabbatical to visit peace groups throughout the world. His first stop was England. Fellowship of Reconciliation members and Quakers directed him to a big anti-war demonstration at the U.S. Embassy. Bill Clinton was there and recognized McSorley. After the demonstration, Clinton asked the Jesuit whether he could lead the Catholic prayers. The next day, at an interfaith prayer meeting he'd helped organize in a nearby Anglican church, McSorley offered a prayer of occultist St. Francis. Clinton joined in, and they marched back to the embassy and left white crosses to symbolize the deaths of Americans. McSorley then went to France and Scandinavia to meet peace people. Stepping off the train right behind him in Oslo, Norway, was Bill Clinton. That evening before McSorley boarded his train for an overnight trip south, he and Clinton dined together. He was just like most of the students, said McSorley. On July 6, 1995, Clinton was back at Georgetown. In a lengthy talk, he laid out his stance as a candidate for re-election and reaffirmed the Fabian socialist values of activism in the 60s and the 70s. Arthur Jones, 1995. The Catholic Vatican's intelligence arm of Jesuits were working closely with U.S. intelligence to usher in the New World Order. Those who were actively laying the groundwork for implementing the New World Order through mind conditioning of the masses made no distinction between the Democratic and Republican parties. Their aspirations were international in proportion, not American. Members were often drawn from among other elitist groups, Council on Foreign Relations like George W. Bush. Bill Clinton was an active member of the CFR Bilderbergers, founded and organized in 1954 by former Nazi SS officer and Knight of Malta Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, in conjunction with a Jesuit priest and a 33rd degree Freemason Joseph Redinger, and Trilateral Commission. Based on numerous conversations I overheard, Clinton was being groomed and prepared to fill the role of the president under the guise of Democrat in the event that the American people became discouraged with Republican leaders. Governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton, using standard Jesuit hand signals and cryptic language, triggered/switched me and accessed a previously programmed message. Torture to the point just before death, such as with death's door programming, was jointly used by the Catholic Jesuits and the CIA in Project Monarch. Bring into power the Order's universal monarch of the world. Kathy O'Brien, 1995. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Monica Lewinsky. William Bill Clinton, 1998. Freemason and Jesuit coadjutor, 42nd President of the United States. Indeed, Father, is that not a lie, a perjury to boot? No, said the Father. Jesuit Sanchez and Philetus prove that it is not, for says the latter, it is the intention that determines the quality of the action, and he suggests a still surer method for avoiding falsehood, which is this: after saying aloud, I swear that I have not done that, to add in a low voice today, or after saying aloud, I swear, to interpose in a whisper, that I say, and then continue aloud, that I have not done that. This you perceive is telling the truth. Blaise Pascal, 1656. Today, we have seen the absurd farce of the liberal Jesuit Father Drinan, who introduced the House resolution for the impeachment of President Richard Nixon, being driven from Congress because the most overtly Pope of our time, John Paul II, feels Drinan's position in Congress is too political. As sinister organizations like the Spanish and Latin America-based Opus Dei gain in power, now aiding and abetting the Order's Roman Catholic Latin American alien invasion of the U.S., their rise abetted by right-wing elements in the Jesuit order itself, it will be the moderates in the church structure, and not just the extreme communist theology of liberation minority, who will find themselves more and more on the out. To understand the rise of right-wing Catholic power worldwide, it is necessary to clearly identify the heart of the beast. That is an organization called the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, SMOM, a Vatican order which has been in existence for almost 1,000 years. Today, the resurgence of SMOM is best symbolized by the fact that SMOM member William Casey is the current head of the CIA. Casey will be one of the figures who will give the Donovan Award, trophy of the OSS All Boys, to JFK assassin John McCone, a devout Catholic, SMOM member and former head of the CIA. It was McCone in his position as one of the heads of ITT who played a leading role in coordinating the destabilization of the Allende government in Chile. Other leading members of American SOM are William and James Buckley, with the replacement of right-wing Catholic SMOM Richard Allen by the equally right-wing Catholic SMOM William P. Clark as President Reagan's National Security Council advisor. The influence of SMOM has increased. With his new post, Clark has brought along SMOM William F. Buckley as one of his political consultants. Another devout Catholic, SMOM and JFK assassin General Vernon Walters, the brain behind the 1964 coup against the Goulart government in Brazil and one of the dirtiest figures in the American intelligence community, has become the key man for both Alexander Haig and William Clark in dealing with Central America. Given the fact that Alexander Haig, whose father, Francis R. Haig, is a Jesuit priest himself, has the closest ties to the right-wing Catholic-run Jesuit Georgetown Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, it is safe to say that Reagan will be under total control of this group should they decide to go eyeball to eyeball with the Soviet Union in some new Cuban Missile Crisis situation or the ending of the Cold War. Kevin Cogan, 1982. We see Rome's satanic Nazi Fourth Reich using United States troops to murder the leaders and peoples of nations so that the Roman Antichrist can place his own like-minded leaders in the place of those he ordered to be assassinated or murdered, as in the assassination of Knight of Columbus John F. Kennedy, and thus replacing him with High Freemason Lyndon B. Johnson. These actions are causing all the nations of the world to hate the people of the United States of America. We were once the most loved nation and are the most hated. The Antichrist in Rome doesn't allow his world-controlled media to fully tell the truth about what the people of other nations think about us or why they think this way. They hate us because of what the Antichrist through the high-ranking Roman Nazi agents which have infiltrated our government is doing to them, Serbians, Muslims, etc. When these nations respond to the Roman Nazi agents' unholy aggression which is coming from the US through the orders of the Antichrist in Rome, the Pope's CFR-controlled media and his puppets lead us to believe we should go to war against them. Would you not hate someone who's bombing you, your family, and your friends for no apparent reason? The BATF, FBI, DEA, the Federal Bureau Task Force, CIA, CFR, Knights of Malta, all these are branches of the Vatican. The Vatican doesn't care at all if you come against the president, a king, a queen, or one of these branches because they're nothing but smokescreens for the Pope. President George W. Bush is the most Catholic president we've ever had. He's surrounded with cardinals. From the beginning of his presidency, George Bush has been promoting the Vatican Nazi Jesuit agenda. 2 months in his presidency, surrounded by cardinals of Rome, the president dedicated a cultural center in Washington, D.C. to the greatest enemy this republic has ever had, the Pope of Rome. Bush declared he is going to enforce the words and teachings of the Pope here in America. According to Patricia Zappa, the Catholic News Service, March 24, 2001, President Bush said the best way to honor John Paul II truly was one of the greatest manners to take his teachings seriously, to listen to his words and put his words and teachings into actions here in America, which teachings include inquisitional torture by the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security following the Jesuit-authored U.S. Patriot Acts. The Bolsheviks were originally saved from collapse by Herbert Hoover, CFR, the Secretary of Commerce under high-level Freemason President Warren G. Harding, who raised money to buy food which was appropriated by Lenin and his gangsters. After the Bolshevik Revolution, Standard Oil, New Jersey, bought 50% of the Nobel's huge Caucasus oil fields. Even though the property had theoretically been nationalized, the Knights of Malta consolidating all oil production in the Morgan/Rockefeller banking cartels under their control. In 1927, Standard Oil of New York built a refinery in Russia, thereby helping the Bolsheviks put their economy back on its feet. In order to rescue the Bolsheviks, who were supposedly an archenemy, the Jesuit orders FBI conducting mass roundups in 1919 under the guise of the Red Scare. Furthering American fascism, the Chase National Bank was instrumental in establishing the SMOM-led American-Russia Chamber of Commerce in 1922. The Rockefellers' Chase National Bank also was involved in selling Bolshevik bonds in the United States in 1928. Professor Anthony Sutton proves conclusively in his 3-volume history of Soviet technological development that the Soviet Union was almost literally manufactured by the USA. Sutton quotes a report by CFR member, Lend-Lease chairman, Skull and Bonesman, Knight of Malta, Verrill Harriman, to the State Department in June 1944 as stating, Stalin paid tribute to the assistance rendered by the United States to Soviet industry before and during the war. He said that about 2/3 of all large industrial enterprise in the Soviet Union had been built with United States help or technical assistance. Sutton shows that there's hardly a segment of the Soviet economy which is not a result of the transference of Western, particularly American, technology. This cannot be wholly the result of accident. For 50 years, the Federal Reserve CFR Rockefeller insider crowd has advocated and carried out policies aimed at increasing the power of the satellite, the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, America spends $75 billion a year on defense to protect itself from the enemies. The insiders are building up under the Nixon administration, which, contrary to campaign promises, had multiplied trade with the Reds tenfold. American concerns are building the world's largest truck factory, the Kama River Truck Factory, for the Soviet communists. Gary Allen, 1971. Tragically, since the day in 1993 when CFR/Jesuit temporal coadjutors Bill Clinton and Al Gore were sworn in, hands on the Bible, as president and vice president respectively, it has become far more likely that this scene will become a familiar one to Americans. The danger to all Americans, but especially those in uniform, of facing an attack by a well-armed Chinese People's Liberation Army, PLA, will be the haunting legacy of the Clinton-Gore administration well into this new century. We have detailed our assaults on our national security, nuclear espionage, failure to stop Chinese arms sales to Islamic terrorist nations, and technological assistance to China's military, especially its missile programs. All of these increase the dangers to the American homeland, our friends and allies abroad, and our men and women in uniform, consider just some of the many allegedly post-Cold War, i.e. no more communist threat, Russian military transfers to communist China during Vice President Gore's stewardship of the US-Russian relationship. Destroyers equipped with nuclear missiles, Su-27 fighter aircraft and Su-30 attack aircraft, Kilo-class submarines and advanced nuclear submarine technology, long-range cruise missile technology, military helicopters and transports, a wide range of air-to-air, ground-to-air and anti-radar missiles, space technology, who direct military applications including long-range ballistic missiles, multiple warheads and anti-satellite technology. All of these weapons can be used against the United States military as well as our allies. Crucially, the United States never objected to Russian arms sales to Communist China. This would have been Gore's job, to lead the diplomatic effort to stop these arms sales. He didn't do it. The result is a Russian-Chinese strategic partnership. The two nations have even agreed to conduct joint combat training aimed at the United States. As America's military might was declining, Bill Clinton and Al Gore were helping to strengthen a hostile PRC. The great threat of the 21st century to the United States and the world is the nuclear-armed communist dictatorship in the People's Republic of China. Its rulers oppress 1.3 billion people under socialism with Chinese characteristics. The result of the pro-red Chinese Clinton-Gore administration has been that the United States has actually helped create a new superpower threat to world peace and stability in the decades to come. One confidential Chinese government report leaked to the Hong Kong press in 1997 predicted a future war between China and the United States over Taiwan. With the return of international banking havens Hong Kong and Macau to Chinese rule, the Taiwan issue will inevitably become China's major event around 2010. If the United States uses force to meddle in China's sovereignty and internal affairs, China will certainly fight a war against aggression, thus leading to a limited Sino-US war. How could China's presence in Panama pose a threat via Hutchinson Wanpo, owned by billionaire Lia Ka-shing, now in control of the locks? The US Army reports final classified passage was short and succinct. Hutchinson's containerized shipping facilities in the Panama Canal, as well as the Bahamas, could provide a conduit for illegal shipments of technology or prohibited items to the West, to the PRC, or facilitate the movement of arms and other prohibited items into the Americas, preparing for America's coming Sino-Soviet Muslim Latino military invasion. The Cox Committee report on the Wen Ho Lee case is considered a worst-case scenario, but it is also the most credible because it is relatively untainted by the spin from the White House. It is said that China has stolen classified information on all of the United States' most advanced thermonuclear warheads. The People's Republic of China is the most serious national security threat the United States faces at present and will remain so into the foreseeable future. This great strategic threat includes the disruption of vital US interests in the Pacific region and even a possibility of a nuclear war that could cost millions of American lives due to controlled detonations of pre-placed nuclear devices in both countries by the Black Post and the National Intelligence Community rather than by mutual airborne nuclear detonations, which possibly the author denies. Bill Gertz, 2000. You talk as if you have nothing to do with this. This is all you're doing. This infection you call freedom without meaning, without purpose. You have given my country to gangsters and prostitutes. You've taken everything from us. There's nothing left. Russian terrorist in the 1990s. Spoken to the American president. As a former colonel in the GRU, the military counterpart of the KGB, now called SVR, I am the GRU's highest ranking Soviet defector to the United States, and if I have one message for my adopted country, It is this: the Cold War is not over. The new Cold War is between the Russian mafia, controlled by the Vatican via her Russian Priory of the Knights of Malta, now resident in Moscow and St. Petersburg, ruling Russian intelligence, FSB/SVR/GRU, and like the Bolshevik Revolution, openly led by the Pope's Masonic Court Jews, Ludwig Feinberg, Vladimir Rabinovich, etc., and the United States. And in this new Cold War, the Russian mafia has every tool, every weapon, every intelligence asset at its disposal that the old Soviet Union had. America is facing a nation led by gangsters who have nuclear weapons, and some of those weapons are actual in American soil. Today, American business is the chief target of the GRU, the SVR, and the entire network of Russian spies. The paymaster is the Russian mafia, exactly as the SVR's counterpart, the CIA, financed by the Sicilian-led American mafia's international drug trade, as admitted by Knight of Malta and DCI William J. Casey. If this isn't bad enough, Russia and China have signed agreements to share economic and military intelligence. Mayors of the largest cities around the United States are welcoming Russian mobsters to their communities. They do not want to hear from the FBI that their new local moguls are criminals in disguise. Italian-American Roman Catholic 9/11 co-conspirator Knight of Malta Mayor Rudolph Giuliani of New York, for instance, enthusiastically welcomes Russian investment in the city, but his administration is apparently unconcerned about its source. In obedience to the Archbishop of New York, Knight of Malta Edward Cardinal Egan, not a problem for the United States is Iran, armed by the CIA during the 1980s via the Reagan/Bush Iran-Contra scandal. Iran, it is believed, already has chemical and biological weapons. With Russia's help, Iran will have nuclear weapons as well, so that when America experiences her common NSA/CIA/DIA triggered nuclear detonations, Iran can be blamed. Russia helped North Korea develop its Nodong missiles, which can attack the entire Bible-reading South Korean peninsula. Russia has also given North Korea the technology to develop its own nuclear weapons. Though most Americans don't realize that America is already penetrated by Russian military intelligence to the extent that arms lie in wait for use by Russian special forces or Spetsnaz. As a GRU officer, my main mission was to prepare for war. I can tell you that for the Soviet Union and for the Russian Federation, America was and is the main expected wartime adversary. Other countries count only as a means to attack America. Spetsnaz troops are currently training inside the United States. They regularly enter the country as foreign tourists using fake passports and their knowledge of foreign languages to pass as Germans or Eastern Europeans. They are the best supplied troops in the Russian military. One of the GRU's major tasks is to find drop sites for their supplies of clothes, cash, and special equipment, including even small nuclear devices, the so-called suitcase bombs. In wartime, many GRU officers, all of whom were men, would go undercover and directly aid the Spetsnaz forces. These wartime plans were fully in place during the Caribbean crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis, as Americans refer to it, and remain fully in place today. In 1962, Spetsnaz forces were deployed all over the free world, ready to commit acts of sabotage financed by New York banks. Most of the Arab terrorist groups were also trained by the Spetsnaz. Even the terrorist group aided by the high command of the Black Pope's FBI and CIA that sponsored the 1993 World Trade Center bombing had been trained by people who themselves have been trained by the GRU. Stanislav Lunev, Knight of Malta, George H.W. Bush, and CFR/Secretary of State James Baker were among the architects of a series of secret policies that committed American taxpayer dollars to assisting Freemason Saddam Hussein and allowed the reckless export of U.S. technology to some of the Iraqi dictator's most cherished and lethal weapons projects. Alan Friedman, 1993. Every president, from Johnson to Clinton and now Bush, had been the abject tool of the order, fulfilling Jesuitical politics, treasonous internationalist, and plotting to make the company's infallible Pope the universal monarch of the world. Satan's theocratic kingdom offered to the Lord Jesus Christ has been given to the Jesuit Superior General who rules the Pope's Vatican with its American hierarchy, directing the American Empire's socialist, communist, corporate, fascist, democratic processes in their entirety. This so-called diabolic and monopolistic political control was clearly described in 1933 by Lady Queenborough, who wrote, "The game of politics is the pursuit of power. In all democracies, there are two separate organizations playing the political game, the open and visible one, the members of which hold office as members of government, and the invisible one composed of individuals who control this visible organization and in whom is vested the real power, the essence of which is finance, controlling the publicity which makes or unmakes its tools. This financial power may be used to promote truth or fallacies, good or evil, national prosperity and national ruin. The strength of a democracy thus lies at the mercy of invisible leaders who, being nationally responsible, cannot be called to account for the consequences of the acts of the governments they control." A perfect description of the Pope's CFR. This at the same time constitutes the inherent weakness of any form of government, the apotheosis of which is the control of both parties in the state, right and left, radical and conservative, by the same forces. Then only the puppets change while the rule of the individuals controlling the machine continues unhindered. Voters who wonder why their efforts have failed wonder in vain. As the dupes of a controlled publicity, their privilege of the vote is a farce. Vote scam Collier and Collier, 1992. If all factions in a state can be controlled from one source, the CFR, why should international control from Rome be impracticable? From the reversal of President Kennedy's policy to end the Vietnam War in 1963, to the war in Yugoslavia in 1998, and now the crusade in Central Asia against Islam 2001 at present, the Jesuits have maintained control over the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the empire's government. The murder of the heretics continues abroad, from the infidel Buddhists in the Far East to the heretic Orthodox Serbians in the Balkans. The Jesuits, in control of both George H.W. Bush, along with the American military, and Saddam Hussein, through 33rd degree Freemasonry, extirpated the infidel Muslims of Iraq while initiating the unification of Europe's military, largely Roman Catholic, during Operation Desert Storm. An anonymous source suggests why the Islamic people of Iraq have been mass murdered by the military-industrial complex of the Orders Holy Roman 14th Amendment American Empire for the last 28 years, at the request of Pope Pius XI in 1931, and as directed by Jesuit General Lidokowski. The Jesuits of the New England province, headquartered in Boston, opened a new high school in 1932 by the name of Baghdad College, located in Baghdad, Iraq, and staffed by the Jesuit fathers, scholastics, and brothers from our U.S. provinces. Over the years, Baghdad College flourished on what became a beautiful date palm-covered property, was attended by both Catholic and Islamic students, and developed a reputation as one of the finest schools in Iraq. The Jesuits in Iraq operated under government restriction that they engage in, and no proselytizing of the Islamic students, although they were free to service Catholic communities in the country. Some years later, in 1956, the Jesuits opened Al-Hikmah University with curricula in business and engineering. Al-Hikmah was also located in the Baghdad area, several miles from Baghdad College. Remembering that the universities of the military company of the Society of Jesus are in fact military fortresses through which the Jesuits carry out the military quest in subordinating all nations to the absolute temporal power of the papal Caesar in Rome, we read further that the political events in Iraq from 1932 to 1979 included 1932 Independence, League of Nations mandate. Faisal I becomes king of independent Iraq. Jesuits opened Baghdad College High School in Iraq. 1933, King Faisal I dies. Faisal II becomes king of Iraq. 1956, Jesuits open Al-Hikmah University in Baghdad. 1958, Hashemite dynasty overthrown, as had been done by the orders Wahhabi al-Saud tribe to the Arabian Hashemite dynasty 1926. King Faisal II and Prime Minister Nurai Saeed are killed. Karim Qasim seizes power, Republic proclaimed. 1963. President Karim Qasim overthrown and killed. 1966. President Muhammad Arif killed in a helicopter crash. 1968. November. Al-Hikmat Jesuits expelled from Iraq, allowed 5 days to leave the country. 1969. All Jesuits expelled from Iraq, including Fr. Joseph McDonald. 1979. Saddam Hussein becomes president of Iraq. Payback time for the Muslim people of Iraq, 1979 and present. I wonder if the above exposure of the Jesuits entitled Iraq, ravaged by more than 2 decades of war, deprivation, and Jesuit tyranny, administered by the Black Pope's Masonic Hussein dynasty, to the mass destruction of horrendous massacres connected with the various wars and bombings, the Iran-Iraq War, the Gulf War, etc., and now invaded during the orders anti-American, Anglo-American led bogus war on Islamic terrorism. Dear Truth Seeker, could it be that Saddam Hussein, the resultant Muslim military dictator of Iraq for 25 years, who used chemical weapons not only on Iran but on his own Iraqi people, was put in power by the Jesuit order? Is it not extremely telling that Saddam Hussein was never eliminated by an easily ordered special operation of the Jesuits, American military intelligence during the Gulf War, as he had been a brother Shriner Freemason and business partner with the order's CFR member, a mafia associate and former CIA Director President George H.W. Bush? See Pete Bruton's The Mafia, CIA and George Bush, 1992. Clearly the Black Pope's war upon Iraq for the last 28 years have been waged against the Muslim peoples of Iraq, not the Jesuit-controlled government of Iraq, as Saddam was secretly removed and his stand-in double was openly hung. Meanwhile, we American people have been brainwashed into embracing the addiction of games and amusements, while our intelligence communities are pursuing fun and games against false enemies, intrigues, and assassinations in restoring and maintaining the temporal power of the Pope around the world. The revived Greco-Roman Olympic Games fulfill a major goal of the Jesuit order, the bringing of the world's people together, glorifying the physical abilities of man. One day it will be an international union around one satanic man, the risen papal Caesar, having raised the Vatican and ruling the world under a new name possibly set. The American people are not only addicted to the Olympic Games, but we are consumed with the vanities of professional sports, all of which should be abolished. This is precisely what the Jesuits said they would do in their blueprint for the world government. The protocols of the learned elders of Zion, protocol number 13, declares, in order that the masses themselves may not guess what our fruitless agitations are about, we further distract them with amusements, games, pastimes, passions, people's palaces. Soon we shall begin through the press to propose competitions in art, in sport of all kinds. These interests will finally distract their minds. Dear Truth Seeker, it is a matter of fact these games and amusements are not controlled by a Jewish conspiracy, as the authors of the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion would have us believe, but by a Gentile conspiracy. How do we know this? Jesus the Messiah declared to his Old Testament Hebrew/Jewish disciples, "And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled." Luke 21 verses 20 and 24. Thus the biblical explanation of the present plight of the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is clear. The destruction of Jerusalem, along with its second temple by Roman legions of General Titus, the fifth king or Roman Caesar of Revelation 17:10, occurred in 70 AD due to Israel's breaking of the conditional Mosaic covenant, which includes the rejection of that prophet, Deuteronomy 18:18, Jesus the Messiah, national Israel composed of the Hebrew/Jewish race, has been the tale of all nations, Deuteronomy 28:13, scattered and persecuted by ruling and rich Gentiles throughout the world, as foretold by Moses the prophet. Somberly moved by the Holy Spirit of God, Moses wrote, "The Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. thou shalt go out one way against them, and shalt be removed into all kingdoms of the earth, and thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee. The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, thou shalt be the tail. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. And among these nations shalt thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest. But the Lord shall give thee a trembling heart, and failing of eyes, and sorrow of mind. And thy life shall hang in doubt before thee. And thou shalt fear day and night, and shalt have none assurance of thy life. In the morning thou shalt say, would God it were even. And at even thou shalt say, would God it were morning. For the fear of thine heart, wherewith thou shalt fear, and for the sight of thine eyes, which thou shalt see. Deuteronomy 28, 25 and 37. Deuteronomy 28, verses 43, 44. Deuteronomy 28, verses 64 to 67. During this time of dispersion, Jerusalem has been under Gentile dominion, and even though the holy city is presently governed by Masonic Jewish labor Zionists, they willingly rule by permission only on behalf of evil white Gentiles now governing New York, London, and Rome. The Black Pope, with his infallible White Pope, backed by his blue blood Illuminati bloodlines within the militaristic Knights of Malta and hundreds of commoner Masonic secret societies. Therefore, we are living under the preeminence of a white Gentile Jesuit conspiracy centered in Rome, with its tentacles directing Britain and America, and thus all nations of the world, including China, Russia, and all Muslim nations. It employs notorious Masonic Jews and Gentiles as their agents. This furthers the deception of an international Jewish conspiracy oppressing the nations. Using this lie, Satan, with his white Gentile Jesuit general in control of all major secret societies, is creating global anti-Jewish fury once again. This fury will one day culminate in the last mad attempt of the world Gentile nations to invade Israel, the Holy Land, Zechariah 2:12, and attempt the destruction of the physical descendants of Jacob, the holy people, Daniel 12:7, or the holy seed, Isaiah 6:13, in the plains of Megiddo called Armageddon, Revelation 14 verses 14 to 20, Revelation 16 verse 16, and Revelation 19 verses 11 to 21. A few examples of this white Gentile Jesuit conspiracy will suffice, as the players are always members of the same secret society. Walt Disney, the founder of Disneyland and Disney World, was a 33rd degree Freemason. The Irish Leo J. O'Donovan, professed Jesuit of the Fourth Vow, past president of Georgetown University and a bosom friend of President Clinton, was on a 17-member board of directors of the Walt Disney Company from 1996 to 1998. The racial Jew and Roman Catholic Knight of Malta Bowie Kuhn was the commissioner of baseball. Knight of Malta Frank Capra was Hollywood's greatest director and censor of World War II, and the land upon which Yankee Stadium sits was and still is owned by the Knights of Columbus. Of the Knights of Columbus we read, the Knights of Columbus is a fraternal organization of Catholic men with membership of nearly 1.2 million, over 1 million junior Jesuit crusading executioners for the Pope. The Knights bought for 6.5 million the land on which Yankee Stadium in New York stands. Thus, when in October 1965 Pope Paul VI went to New York City to visit the United Nations, and later at a pontifical mass in Yankee Stadium, His Holiness in fact was on home ground. After the death of Spellman's President Johnson, Richard Nixon became Commander-in-Chief. Nixon, the old friend of Spellman and fellow Cold Warrior, extended the war in Vietnam to the bombing of Cambodia at the advice of a Jesuit, Dan Lyons, who personally consulted General Abrams, the commander of U.S. forces in Vietnam. Nixon continued to promote the Jesuit agenda as outlined in the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, as a speechwriter was another Jesuit. One of Nixon's main speechwriters during 3 whole years was a Jesuit father, the Reverend John McLaughlin, who wrote the Nixon speeches at a salary of $32,000 a year, and presently heads the publicly aired McLaughlin Group, formerly televised by an atheist CFR member, Ted Turner, through his media monopoly cable news network CNN. Dear Truth Seeker, do you see now that the Black Pope, in controlling his 14th Amendment American empire through the cardinals Council on Foreign Relations and implementing the protocols of the learned elders of Zion fulfills his evil Council of Trent to his black robe militia, the Company of Jesus. The progress of the great Jesuit conspiracy controlling American presidents from Lyndon Johnson to George W. Bush is clearly described in two great works. The first is Colonel James Bo Gritz's Call to Serve, Profiles in Conspiracy from John F. Kennedy to George Bush, from which we read, "This is a definite account of a nation betrayed, a spiderweb of patriots for profit, operating from the highest positions of special trust and confidence, have successfully circumvented our constitutional system in pursuit of a new world order. They have infused America with the drugs via the CFR's CIA/Mafia alliance in order to fund covert operations while sealing the fate of our servicemen left in communist prisons. At the very least, his book represents a factual, true-life adventure that will take you on a riveting journey from the White House down a heroin highway to Burma's Golden Triangle, where we will meet General Kun Sa, undisputed drug overlord. You will infiltrate the jungles of communist Asia to rescue U.S. POWs and in turn be pursued. You'll be taken behind the veil of U.S. covert operations to view deceit and betrayal. At best, this will produce a crack in the facade of the 20th century American government to which concerned citizens can view the looming peril and act in time to reverse our course while God gives us time. Dear truth seeker, we must never forget that the Mormon James Bo Gritz, Army Colonel and Commander of the Green Berets, though he appears to have remained a CIA operative and thus in the employ of the company's American intelligence community, was the most decorated soldier of the Vatican's war in Vietnam. The second is Mark Phillips and Kathy O'Brien's Transformation of America, which declares this book is primarily the autobiography of Kathy O'Brien, who did not volunteer for service to her country but was used her entire life against her innate voluntary will for perpetrating criminal activity by many so-called leaders within the U.S. government. Together, Kathy and I have dedicated our lives to the pursuit of justice and rehabilitation for her and Kelly, Kathy's repeatedly raped, tortured, and abused daughter. All avenues of justice and rehabilitative relief had been blocked for reasons of national security. The question arises, whose security? Kathy O'Brien provides the logical answer. Kathy O'Brien, forced into compulsory prostitution to service American presidents Ford, Reagan, and Bush, has bravely come forth and told a story for which she should be honored by all Americans. Mark Phillips, who rescued her from white slavery and near death, ought to be given the same. For in recalling Jeremiah Crowley's great work written in the early 20th century, the Pope Chief of White Slavers, High Priest of Intrigue, our hero proved the Vicar of Christ controlled organized prostitution in the American Empire. Today, Pope Benedict XVI, now advised by Henry Kissinger, controls it. Through his CIA/Mafia, protected by his CFR-ruled Attorney General, Grand Inquisitor, directing the Department of Justice, Holy Office of the Inquisition, serviced by the order of the FBI. These works, including Jesuit Vatican Tyranny, a 21-page article updating the reader on the traitors presently empowered by the company to despotically rule over its Holy Roman 14th Amendment American Empire, served as companions to Vatican assassins wounded in the house of my friends, and are most heartily recommended by the author in describing the Jesuit control of Washington through the Council on Foreign Relations for the last 80 years. Author Joel Baineman, in his 1992 masterpiece, The Crimes of a President, New Revelations in Conspiracy and Cover-Up in the Bush and Reagan administrations, further sums up the matter. 33rd degree Freemason George H.W. Bush has corrupted the American system to such an extent that he can get away with any crime, just like his son President George W. Bush. George Bush, Skull and Bones, drug trafficking by the CIA, the assassinations of JFK and RFK, the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission. There is a global conspiracy founded on the Freemasonry notion of a new world order and global domination, and President Bush, and now his president's son, who is a party to the Jesuit-controlled CFR/CIA demolition of the WTC, plays a major part in it. Let us read. Diligently pray, and then acquit ourselves as men, remembering the Lord's exhortation at the mouth of Joab found in 1 Chronicles 19:13. Be of good courage, and let us behave ourselves valiantly for our people, and for the cities of our God, and let the Lord do that which is good in his sight. Jesuit Dr. John McLaughlin, 1927 to present, 1973. This arrogant Jesuit was a speechwriter and special assistant confessor to President Nixon and Ford. He has written for SMOM William F. Buckley Jr.'s National Review and hosts the McLaughlin Group, popular in the Jesuit theater, Babylonish Hollywood. He has appeared in several motion pictures. U.S. Congressman Jesuit priest Robert F. Drinan, 1973, the son of Loyola, introduced a House resolution for the impeachment of President Nixon for ending the Vietnam War prematurely. Instead of killing the commander-in-chief as the company had murdered President Kennedy, Nixon was removed with the CIA scandal known as the Watergate Affair, backed by Papal Knights Kissinger and Haig. After Nixon's resignation, Shrine of Freemason and Warren Commission conspirator President Ford was ordered to pardon the broken Quaker. Drinan, America's Rodin the Jesuit, is now a law professor at the nation's true capital, the Black Popes Jesuit Georgetown University. The history of the Jesuits, James Arabito. Knight of Malta, William J. Casey, 1913 to 1987. Servant, Archbishop of New York. SMOM John Cardinal O'Connor, Director, Central Intelligence Agency, Reagan Administration, 1980 to 1987. William J. Casey with Fordham University Jesuits, 1950, a graduate and trustee of the Jesuit Orders, Fordham University, an officer of SMOM Bill Donovan's OSS, a director of the SEC, an Export-Import Bank, Irish Roman Catholic. William J. Casey, friend of William F. Buckley Jr., was a most important person of the SMOM-dominated government of Papal Knight Ronald Reagan, who chose Jesuit William J. Bennett to be his Secretary of Education, SMOM Admiral James D. Watkins to be the Chief of Naval Operations, and gave formal recognition to the Papal Caesar's Vatican City-State in 1984. The Last Hero, Anthony Cave Brown, New York Times Books, 1982. President Nixon, SEC Commissioner Casey and wife. Judge Sirica, 1971. President Ronald Reagan, CIA Director William J. Casey in 85. Above, we have one of President Nixon's Jesuit-controlled masters being sworn into the office of Securities and Exchange Commissioner by federal Judge John J. Sirica, the very Roman Catholic judge who sentenced Jesuit-trained G. Gordon Liddy to 20 years in prison for refusing to betray Nixon during the Orders Watergate scandal. Below, we have Honorary Knight of Malta and Irish-American Crypto-Roman Catholic President Ronald Reagan, the abject tool of New York Archbishop John Cardinal O'Connor's Knights of Malta, including J. Peter Grace Jr. of the Grace Commission and Alexander M. Haig Jr. sitting with his advisor and mastermind behind the Iran-Contra scandal, the Jesuit-trained Fordham University graduate and Knight of Malta William J. Casey. Casey later died suddenly at the Orders Georgetown University Hospital shortly before his congregational testimony concerning the Iran-Contra scandal. Veil, The Secret Wars of the CIA, 1981 to 1987, Bob Woodward. CIA Director William J. Casey, KGB officer Arkady Shevchenko. Casey warmly chats at the Washington Party with the former Undersecretary General of the UN for the Soviet Union who defected to America in 1978. Rome's US-based KGB officer Vitaly Yurichenko, 1985. In meeting with his American NSA/CIA boss, KGB officer Vitaly Yurichenko defected to America in 1985 but returned to the USSR 3 months later, having no fear of being shot or imprisoned in the Orders Gulag archipelago. During his CIA debriefing, Yurichenko met with Knight of Malta William J. Casey for an informative business dinner one evening at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. Indeed, the Black Pope CIA and KGB have worked together since the beginning of the Vatican's Cold War. As of April the 1st, 2003, General Yevgeny Primakov, the former KGB head, has been hired as a consultant by the company's American Gestapo, the Department of Homeland Security, created by Jesuit temporal coadjutor and CIA officer, CFR member John C. Gannon. Veil, The Secret Wars of the CIA, 1981 to 1987. Reagan with October surprise boss William J. Casey, 1980, overthrowing Prime Minister Mossadegh, who patriotically nationalized Iran's oil industry, thus attacking the Black Pope's British-owned Anglo-Iranian oil company. The Shah returned to his throne via the CIA and MI6 Operation Ajax. Shah Pahlavi, having recognized the Pope's labor Zionist government of Israel, created his dreaded secret police, SAVAK, in 1957 and ruled Iran with an iron fist in a velvet glove, until departing for the US in 79. Aided by the CIA the same year, Ayatollah Khomeini assumed power in Iran, as did Masonic Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Rome's American Knights of Malta, including DCI William J. Casey, would arm Iran via secret deals. The October surprise, still shrouded in mystery, included the Iran-Contra affair. In the name of the American people, the Pope's CFR-controlled US government illegally armed Iran Gate in 1985, and Iraq Gate 1985 to 89, during the Iran-Iraq War. The purpose of the merciless and bloody war was to create mutual annihilation of Muslims, drive the Jews of both nations back to Israel, and create anti-American fury throughout the Muslim world. The arms sold to Iran and Iraq would ultimately be used against invading American soldiers through their ordered, unprotected mass detonations of chemical and biological weapons, weakening our armed forces during its Vatican-decreed crusade against Islam. Upon the Jesuits using the American military-industrial complex to arm the Soviets and Muslim nations during the Pope's Cold War, as well as arming the Chinese and Russians during the post-Cold War, the weapons of our coming Sino-Soviet Muslim Latino invaders will have been made in the USA. Reagan consents to the legal arming of Iraq, White House 85. With Italian Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti, Reagan illegally armed Masonic Saddam Hussein's Iraq 1985 to 1989 during its war with Iran 1980 to 88. This was the secret policy of Rome. Reagan, the mere tool of the Knights of Malta. Vice President George H.W. Bush, CIA Director William J. Casey, National Security Advisor Richard B. Allen, Secretary of State Alexander M. Haig Jr., Ambassador at Large Vernon A. Walters, J.P. de Grace Jr. of the Grace Commission. Jordan's King Hussein with President Bush, May 1990. Freemason Hussein greets Freemason Bush at Kennebunkport, enjoying sweet memories of covert arms transfers through Jordan to Masonic Saddam Hussein. Saddam's arms depots would be blown up by U.S. forces after the 9/11 attack and resultant war on terror, spreading death among both Iraqis and U.S. soldiers. Spiders wept the secret history how the White House illegally armed Iraq. CFR/Edward Stretinius, Anthony Eden, Harry Hopkins, Malta 1945. Freemasons Mikhail Gorbachev and George H.W. Bush, Malta 1989. The Black Pope began and ended his Cold War on the Roman Catholic island of Malta before Jesuit coadjutor Harry Hopkins arrived at Malta with SMOM Charles E. Boland and SMOM W. Averill Harriman. He first had an audience before Pius XII with SMOM Mine C. Taylor. Receiving his instructions for the Yalta Conference, details were finalized at Malta. 45 years later, Bush and Gorbachev ended the Cold War on Malta, graciously hosted by the Knights of Malta in control of the island since 1964. Thereafter, the Russian tongue of SMOM was readmitted into Russia, now based in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Harry Hopkins, a biography, Henry H. Adams. All the best, George Bush, My Life and Letters, and Other Writings. George H.W. Bush. Archbishop of New York, Edward Cardinal Egan, New York 2000. Presidential candidates George W. Bush and Al Gore with their master. George W. Bush Edward Cardinal Egan and Al Gore 2000, as it was in 1963 with Francis Cardinal Spellman controlling both presidential candidates, John F. Kennedy, Richard M. Nixon, so it is today. Taken at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York at the annual Night of Columbus Alfred E. Smith Memorial Dinner, we can see the reverence of both Republican and Democratic Party candidates towards the political master and the absolute power wielded by the Archbishop of the capital of the world. This champion of the temporal power of the Pope of Rome, Edward Cardinal Egan, was John Paul II's trusted agent who orchestrated terrorist events of 9/11 using his Knights of Malta directing every detail of the NSA/CIA/FBI black operation. American Bush royal family at the funeral of John Paul II in 2005. This photo speaks volumes as to who is the real master of America's Bush royal family, now ruling the company's pro-labor Zionist, Holy Roman 14th Amendment, corporate fascist American empire. Why will President George W. Bush and his father, former President George H.W. Bush, as well as former President William J. Clinton, all be kneeling in obeisance to the Pope of Rome when none of them are Roman Catholics? The answer is the Pope is the ruler of the world, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, declaring the nation that will not serve me shall perish. Thus we see the most influential American Knight of Malta at the pinnacle of his power, carefully ascended during his last 50 years. For George H.W. Bush, as an oil tycoon, participated in the Bay of Pigs sacrifice of the Mass, further securing Jesuit Castro's Cuba for a future Sino-Soviet Muslim invasion into Miami, the Kennedy assassination and Great Jesuit cover-up, while a covert CIA contract agent, the Watergate scandal ousting a disobedient President Nixon from office, the Iran-Contra scandal arming Iran for the empire's coming war with the Muslim world, and financing the Nicaragua Contras, who, like the Cuban patriots who sought to overthrow Castro, were betrayed by the fascist CIA. The savings and loan scandal, one of the largest thefts in the history of the world, the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, BCCI, the largest bank fraud in financial history, and the 9/11 demolition of the World Trade Center, providing the pretext for invading Iraq and Afghanistan, igniting the Black Pope's 21st century crusade against Islam. Rome's expanding temporal power is promoted by the Bush family dynasty.